That's where my grandparents came from.
Hi, Renee. I'm just going to change accounts. Hold on.
Or-
I can't even forget it.
Okay.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
It's.
Are you using, is anybody here virtually today?
To fly on that plane, so we took like some,
So
and we went
I
from
suppose
Denver, and then we flew on.
I need something to speak into.
And he was wearing a shirt that said, if it's not O and I'm not going. And so we get to Calgary and there was just an Airbus over to Edmonton. Flight attendant was like, not avoid dead off. That we're all still just upset ourselves.
Yeah.
I think like right now we are, but I think we should look at that.
Well, I don't know. Some do, some don't. I had to do it. I know Renee and Janice had to do it.
I host a council.
Yeah, that's.
And then go through.
Yeah, well, I went to Coast Council.
And it wouldn't-
It wouldn't, so I had to get both and then it connected.
And we,
Sean's online.
and I was talking to you about that today.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, he can hear you.
Sean, we can't get into anything. No internet.
Yeah, I just had to do the same thing, disconnect and reconnect and
And it worked?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I did disconnect.
takes us
I can just.
very slow to reconnect.
They had developed.
You know what? I can almost.
Sometimes you have to say things out loud.
You know,
Based on something that happened over this last year, they're gonna bring it to Cal first to make sure that we're comfortable with the criteria.
Is Sean coming?
So we're gonna have to mesh and we're gonna work on
Do not touch it.
And
I think we're good now.
good?
Yeah, I'm okay now.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah, now you have to literally, we should just put like get some red fingernail polish.
No,
Put a big red fingernail polish.
So can we start, guys? It's 1 minute.
I'm here.
Disconnect.
Yeah, and Natalie's online. Natalie's online. I think, I don't know where Shelley is.
I will get online so I can see.
Yep.
if
Shelley's online as well.
I'll join with you guys. Who's running the Zoom? One of you ladies? Yeah.
who's running the meeting?
That's that. See me trying
You're
to.
going first. You're going before.
There we go. All right, I'll call the meeting to order.
You're done.
January 17th, 2023. No.
I'll do the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, we have no additions to the agenda. Okay, all right, go ahead, Ken.
That the January 17th, 2023 agenda be adopted as presented.
All those in favor of that? Up the vote.
That needs to go.
The other two are,
And shortly it should be up.
let's see, Shelley's.
Shelley said yes.
Okay, so let's get moving. We have the minutes from this year. Just looking.
For your last year.
Yeah, sorry, December 13th. Any problems with the agenda as it was presented?
Agenda or the minutes?
Minutes. Thank you, Ken. You want to run the meeting for me?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I can get out of here. Meeting is adjourned.
Okay, I'm all set up now.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so if I see no problems, can I have a motion to adopt the minutes? Thank you, Councilor Broadhead. All those in favor?
I like the banner we got going.
Yeah.
Wow.
We're having a little bit of technology problems.
Couldn't tell, could not tell.
It's the first day that Sean's actually not in the room. Yeah.
Is
Showing
this-
already. Yeah, exactly. Where are you, Sean? Okay, so the first thing on the agenda, we've got Mike here from ECDEV. He's going to take us through his plans for the business leader forum. I'll just turn right over to you, Mike, unless anyone else wants to introduce him. We're good? Go ahead, Mike.
All right, got my presentation up here. Okay. Good morning, members of the Committee of the Whole. Appointed, but for the record, I'm Mike Erickson, the Director of the City's Economic Development Department. I'm here this morning to present the framework for the Business Leaders Forum. So I'll start with essentially the why. The driver, obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, but one of the drivers was the disbanding of the Economic Sustainability Advisory Board and a recognition that we needed to modernize a couple decades old approach to business consultation and business engagement. We believe that the Business Leaders Forum presents an opportunity for concentrated, high-value engagement and consultation with the private sector. The Business Leaders Forum aligns with the corporate subservice of consultation with business. A little diagram up here that sort of shows that it fits nicely between the work that we do conducting polls and surveys with a broad audience of local businesses and the very narrow audience that we interact with regularly when we consult with businesses one-on-one. So when I talk about the purpose, we spent a lot of time developing and finessing the purpose of the forum and sort of what we hope to achieve and come out of these forums. I think this is really the foundation. We have to get this part right at the outset. So I'll sort of read through the description, then I'll provide a little bit more context. So the purpose is to leverage the collective expertise and experience of local business leaders to help the city of St. Albert better understand and identify coordinated, community-driven solutions to complex city building and local economy related challenges. So within this, I've sort of talked about sort of four key areas or four aspects of this purpose. So this collective problem solving, you'll hear me talk a lot about this morning. But in other words, just bringing together knowledgeable and passionate business leaders to explore and discuss collective solutions to complex, multifaceted problems. Qualitative private sector perspective. So creating an opportunity for the city to receive the qualitative, this idea of qualitative inputs and constructive discussion with local business leaders on issues affecting both private sector and the city. Business industry and interest coordination and collaboration. So this really speaks to connecting business leaders within similar sectors or similar business districts or that have similar interests to address some of these challenges. I think sometimes just putting people, not this is the primary purpose, but sometimes putting similar minded business people or within a similar industry in a room together, there's often an opportunity to learn from each other. And then just this idea, somewhat related of knowledge sharing and an increased understanding. So creating an opportunity for these business leaders and the city to learn from one another, to better understand our local challenges and opportunities. I think sometimes it's easier to throw out simplistic opportunities or simplistic solutions to issues that we don't maybe fully understand. So this might provide an opportunity to help each other understand our unique constraints when it comes to private and public sector. So walk through the format for these forums. I think we've discussed some of this in the past, but I'll just sort of go through and provide some additional detail here. So the format is intended to be in-person meetings, around 25 to 50 people. There'll be 2-hour sessions in the evening, and we're looking to host them twice per year, one in the spring, and one in the fall. Provided a visual there, you can picture people at a series of different tables having discussions amongst 5 or 8 people at a table and sort of rotating through on different topics and discussion questions. One of the key aspects of this framework will be the use of a facilitator. I think this is important, crucial for a couple of reasons. The facilitator, I think, is critical in establishing the right environment for collaboration and problem solving. I think we're keenly aware that sometimes engagement and consultation can lead to, or maybe can open the door sometimes for criticism or identification of problems and sharing of frustrations. And while that can be valuable at sometimes or in some situations, I think the goal for this forum is really to go beyond the problem identification and to focus on problem solving. Facilitator can help keep the group on task and mitigate conflict. I think one of the important things that it does is it helps put the city at the table alongside businesses and alongside business leaders, and is intended to create this atmosphere where we're talking with our business community, not at or to our business community. And then they can bring their expertise in developing some of the support material that may come from this. And probably the final piece, and I think is an important piece, just to provide some reporting, some independent reporting on sort of what's discussed at these forums. Another key piece of this was topic identification. How do we come up with the topics that we're going to discuss? So the framework outlines a process by which department directors will have the opportunity to contribute topics to a form agenda. Then the city's executive leadership would have an opportunity to add or edit or remove some of the topics that are put forward. And then from there, it would come to council for council to have the opportunity to add, edit, remove, and essentially finalize the list of topics that would be discussed. The final step would sort of be administration working with facilitator to develop some of those support materials that might go into some of the topics discussed. So as part of the topics, I think it's important that we want to make sure that we have a series of questions that helped prompt discussion and get us to a point where we're focused on the problem solving. So as part of this, and I think I put it within the report, tried to show some examples of types of questions and how we would frame some of these discussions on certain topics. So they would be designed these questions would be designed to reflect the purpose of the forum, geared towards, again, problem solving, coordination, gaining perspective and expertise from certain industries, sectors, or professions. The discussion questions are not intended to identify problems or gauge interest of support or generate ideas. I think it was clear to administration from previous discussions on this topic that council wanted to be involved, have an opportunity to be involved and participate in this forum. So through the framework, council will have the opportunity to participate in two key aspects really of the forums. The first, I kind of just touched on it, but the process of identifying those topics, so to kind of have that final say. And then secondly, the opportunity to attend and be involved in the forums, to listen to the discussion, to increase our own understanding or your own understanding of certain topics, and to engage in that collective problem solving alongside business leaders.
Like, I think we might also be able to help with who the participants are, for sure, because we might know somebody through our various social circles or whatever, just.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about how we're going to propose to recruit people, and that's one of the elements. There's sort of two ways to do it. And I think one is trying to identify some people in the community that we think would be valuable, that we sort of want as part of the discussion on whatever the topic might be. Oh yeah, I'm at that slide, recruitment. So the recruitment, we put together some criteria. It was meant to be broad and inclusive, but still be focused on private sector. So there's sort of two sets of criteria. The first one is really focused around or somewhat around occupation or occupation related. So that first set would be that the individual owns a business based in St. Albert, or they are a St. Albert resident who's employed in the private sector, or that they're a member of a business support organization based in St. Albert. And then the second set of criteria is more around the topic, or has a topic focus. So they would also have relevant expertise or experience with the forum topic. Be employed in a profession or industry related to a forum topic, or have a professional connection or passion for the forum topic. So the second part of this is the approach to how we would recruit these. So we sort of have two methods, the targeted invitation. I think this is the one that would sort of fit with what you mentioned there, Mayor Heron. This opportunity for us to identify certain business leaders or people within certain professions or industries that we think would be well suited to be part of that topic. The example that I gave is, if we're having a discussion, say the hypothetically the city's proposing to host an international or national sporting event, we may want to have some discussion with business owners that might be impacted or involved in that, or how they could be part of it. The hospitality industry, the hotel owners or operators, the restaurateurs, and folks like that to be part of that conversation. And then the second would be application, which is somewhat of a self-identification. We'd create a process where people could apply if they meet the criteria, they have an interest, or they have some expertise in this area, they want to be part of these forums. And we sort of create a sort of standing list. So once we have two people that have indicated that they want to be part of these, we might go back to them and sort of put them in that targeted approach and say, hey, you were part of this last forum. We think you're your expertise might apply to this forum topic as well. Would you like to attend and be part of it? Budget. So we anticipate that holding 2 business leaders forums per year will cost approximately $23,500 or roughly $12,000 per forum. This captures the cost of renting venues, providing some refreshments, and some modest marketing dollars towards recruitment. Obviously, the largest item within this framework budget is the cost of contracting a facilitator to help run the event and develop some of the topic support materials and provide the post-forum report. What's not included within this budget is the cost of staff time to help coordinate and so some of the implications of this proposed framework, and firstly on the financial part, I just talked about the cost, but the framework here proposes the costs associated with the forum would be funded through the Economic Development Department's annual operating budget. In terms of some of the service implications, and I talked about this at the start, we believe that it would complement some of the existing services that we have around consultation and engagement with businesses. And from an organizational perspective, we believe the forums could did effectively with minor organizational impact through a combination of existing staff resources and the contracted services of a facilitator. So the recommendation that the Standing Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that Council approve the St. Albert Business Leaders Forum framework as presented. If Council does not wish to support the recommended motions, the following alternative motions could be considered. That Council approve the St. Albert Business Leaders Forum framework with amendments as specified by Council. Or alternative 2, that Council direct administration not to establish a St. Albert Business Leaders Forum.
That's great. I'll start off real quick. It's probably more from David. When this came to committee last time, did Council approve the formation of the Business Leader Forum? Did it go to Council? I feel like it must.
Don't know the answer off the top.
I believe that we were directed to sort of formalize this.
Because I feel like once we had that conversation, gave you the kind of the go ahead. That's sort of where the Council could step away. I mean, this is great to get an update. I don't see a need for Council to approve what you've got in front of us. I think this committee could. That's more. Yeah, I'm trying to push things, David, to go to Council that really need to go to Council. This is
So I think it's, yeah,
administrative type.
it's because this is, excuse me, through the chair, because this goes to an aspect of governance. This would not be something that the committee of the whole could like actually approve. You certainly can recommend it, but it probably should go to Council for approval, particularly since it's replacing something that that was a governance.
That's why I was asking if we've already, that's approved.
You've approved eliminating the previous.
Okay.
So what was approved probably in October was the concept of which committees would go for which as information.
Okay.
So you guys didn't challenge anything out of that or pull anything out or whatever. So it's as information. So they're bringing this back as something that's more, I guess, structured or developed. So.
Right, it's the other quick question, then I'll open up and then I'll might finish is the budget. Do you remember what we would generally spend on ESAP? They would meet 6 times a year and dinner probably.
It's 10 or 11 times per year. There's usually one where there was some food involved, and when I joined the organ,
Yeah, so some of this is coming from that, but you also have enough for the 23,000 in your budget right now.
correct.
Okay. All right, anyone else have questions? I got Sheena and then Ken, and you have some too, Mike? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so if we go back to the budget, now here's the question.
Sorry, poor Wes, it's over here. And I never-
And Shelley.
Okay,
So if we look at the budget, that just seems like, I realize you say it's already in your operating budget. But if we have an issue with what you're spending, then what? Because like, I look at this and I'm like, appreciation and for refreshments should not cost $500. That's just high. And audio visual, I think wherever you're renting will probably provide that. So that seems high. The venue might cost $500 to rent it. I can see that. The facilitator, we're paying them $5,000 an hour. Like I'm trying to come to terms with what I understand that we're not charging more in taxes, but this still seems like it seems high. So I'm trying to come to figure out like, what is the facilitator doing in addition to that 2 hours that would cost $10,000?
I think the facilitator's role in this would be to, like I said, help making sure that, because I think it's really important that we frame the discussion questions properly, right? And so there's a certain expertise that comes with, sort of public engagement or facilitators that I don't know that we necessarily have within our department. That some, I want to make sure that we get right, because we don't get that part right. I feel like there's an opportunity for this to become problematic rather than a benefit to the city. And then the reporting piece that they would provide, there's the facilitation part, they're there for the 2 hours for sure, but there would be some work going into, we may provide a 5-10 minute presentation on a certain topic to provide some background before we enter into some discussion. It could be aspects of that. And then the reporting piece as well.
So I think if I could maybe just riff off that theme very quickly, it's there's work pre, there's work during, and there's work post. And so $10,000 based on rough sort of estimates for facilitators is the upper end of what we would pay. We would not seek to pay the upper end of any of that if we could negotiate it at significantly less.
Okay, so what you're telling me is this is the most pessimistic budget you could come up with, and we're hoping to beat it? Because that's, if this is a realistic budget, I have to look at how.
I think it's a conservative budget. Maybe it's the opposite of a conservative budget, right? Like it gives us a little bit of maneuver room. Yes.
That's it for now. Ken.
A couple of questions, if that's all right. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks. I guess some of the questions are, I had it when I was reading the background and all that, and it's around the methodology, around whether there's actually any value. So what's the incentive for these business people to come in? We will send out invitations. There's not necessarily any real incentive to come other than their willingness to participate, I guess. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that probably captures it. We might have some really delicious cinnamon buns or something. Our refreshments and an appreciation portion.
Right.
But I think we're trying to capture folks that are maybe a little bit more altruistic or have a, community minded that want to help the city, that want to be involved in helping us chart the right course forward.
So I would say that there is a pent up desire for people to engage and feel like they're having part and parcel, have their say in terms of a lot of this stuff. So engagements, whether it's been through collective things like UDI or in particular developers working in St. Albert, the Chamber of Commerce, right? Potentially a future BIA. There are a number of organizations, and maybe you can expand on this if you wish, but who have expressed to me that they want a forum to be able to provide input. So I don't think it will be difficult.
Okay. So, this is meant to just supplement, like you mentioned, what we have currently in relation to, your office's ongoing kind of consultation or outreach into the business through surveys, one-on-ones and so that's the feedback you're getting. Okay, well, that's interesting, because I was going to just say, what's the practice across the region? Is this something that is, are we going to be the straw dog for this?
I don't know that I've seen this format before in the region. But I would say, even before, it's funny, I had the opportunity, the fortune of having a pretty in-depth conversation with a senior executive from a development corporation here in the Edmonton region. And we spent close to 60 minutes talking about the issues and problems in different jurisdictions and how do we figure out some of these really big, complex problems. And I kept thinking to myself in the back of my head, we're trying to find a better way to do this rather than pitting folks against each other. And I don't want to use the words, I frame this, we don't want to have engagement and consultation just for the sake of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Try to come out of this with a purpose, with a benefit, where everybody's sort of walking away going, yeah, we actually accomplished something. We've done something. It wasn't a waste of our time.
Yeah.
And often these types of things can feel like that, I think, for participants. And that's what I think we're really trying to get away from.
Well, and I think that leads into my other question then is like, so when we walk out of that room, or when they walk out of that room, I mean, is there the expectation? I think one of the things in around ESAB was the feeling that they lost connectivity to council and some of the decision making. And so will this actually provide that, or are they still going to walk out of there with, okay, you know, I used to always use that term, you know, when all was said and done, let's hope more didn't get said than done, right? So what's the actionable items of expectation in your mind using this methodology?
You know, my hope is, my expectation is that at the end of, 2 hours, I mean, it's tough to presuppose that at the end of 2 hours, we're always going to come up with a magical, solution, a silver bullet for every issue. But I think that my hope is that we can figure some aspects of it out. And that's where I went back to the purpose, where part of this is maybe just having a better understanding of the things that we don't know. Okay, well, here are the private sector's constraints around this issue. If we're working with it or having a discussion around a certain industry or focus, maybe they didn't realize our constraints on this end. So they have to maybe rethink, how they're going to approach it as well. Like at the very least, there should be some shared learning that we take away from this, and just a better understanding of all of the complexities of some of these topics.
I think that the second piece to that is the ongoing communication. So going back to Mike's inverted triangle, right? This is part of, and if all we do is have a meeting and then stop talking to one another, we've sort of wasted the meeting, I think, right? So and I think that goes partly to the facilitator and then partly to the ongoing engagement that occurs across sort of the administration. So we need to communicate. Here's what we talked about. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're not doing and why. We need a little bit more information. So it's that communications plan afterwards to capitalize on the discussion that occurred during that I think is where the money is.
Yeah. And the last question, Madam Mayor, just is there expectation is for council to be there?
I don't think it's an expectation, but certainly open.
Yeah. So there's no requirement. It would be something, it would be that learning opportunity for council as well. Okay. I probably have some other ones. I don't think you should have thrown them. This is a direct comment. I don't think we needed to see that. This is an internal.
Yeah.
You have a budget, you work within the budget. You know what? Otherwise, we're going to get into the weeds.
Yes. Councilor Killick, and then I do see your hand up, Councilor Mansky. I'll come to you right away.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. If there's good cinnamon buns, I'll.
$500 cinnamon buns.
Great idea. I too shared the concerns about facilitator budget, but with the explanation and understanding of, kind of the additional roles kind of makes sense. But I think back in October, I raised a concern about the role of the chamber and working very closely with them. And, they've been a great advocate for simple solutions when it comes to business, like keep taxes low, keep the electrical franchise fee low, et cetera, et cetera. So I really want to make sure that we're engaged with the chamber as a key facility. Start with them as getting their input to this, and then branch out, because I think to have them just mentioned as a possible participant is we're not leveraging, from my sense, the role and connections and expertise that the chamber may already have. Don't want to make them the sole voice, but I would really like to ensure that we have a real strong engagement with them on this, because we have all these other ongoing discussions between council members, executive team, and I think this can really strengthen that with them. And then it really comes down to Councillor Mackay's point of how do we set the expectation that something is going to be actionable out of these meetings, because I think it could quickly devolve into kind of a bitching session kind of thing. I can't think of a better word, but
Best word.
because I think we rehash things and we don't focus it and make it actionable. So any thoughts, maybe even from your, 1 hour discussion as to how do we really make sure that it stays focused and at least there's an actionable suggestion, whether it comes to council and we say we can't action it, that may be our purview around, lowering taxes or, some other kind of a business incentive would still come back to council. But I think, how do you see us getting to something tangible out of these sessions?
Good question. I might pull up a slide that was part of the report to kind of help illustrate where I think really that purpose, how we frame the topics and questions. So I can pull this up. Did you want me to sort of speak to the Chamber of Commerce piece?
Sure. Yeah, I think they're critical.
I absolutely agree. It's the chamber on the regular. There were other members was at our office yesterday. This framework sort of bounced off their executive director and got some feedback on it. I think they were, I'm trying to summarize the comments, but they were okay with it. The one thing I think they keenly pointed out is, maybe some of the challenges we might have trying to recruit people, right? We can't guarantee that we're going to get 25 or 50 people to show up. So I think that was a good point, well heard by them. But maybe to continue with Mr. Fletcher's comments, this isn't just meant to be one touch point with the Chamber of Commerce. We interact with them and work with them and partner with them on many projects. And then I think that we're also very aware that we have over 2,700 businesses in St. Albert, and the Chamber membership is I won't say a small portion, it's a portion of that. So we want to make sure that we're working with and available to work with all businesses, but we recognize that they are a prominent voice in the community.
Okay.
Do you want to add on that one, or did you want?
No, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. And I totally recognize they are just a, segment of all of our businesses. So, yeah.
I threw this in here. This came from the actual report. But I just thought for me, I'll get to just focus on the discussion questions. What I put forward here as a sample topic was a conversation around development incentives. I think it's one that we'll likely have in the near future. But you can see in terms of the discussion questions, this isn't a conversation we have with private sector as to should we do this. This is more a base level of understanding that this is a tool that is being used in other jurisdictions and other municipalities around the Edmonton region. So how do we want to approach this? And so it talks about what outcomes. So this is working with the private sector to help steer us in terms of what outcomes should we be trying to achieve if we were to go down this path and use this tool that many of our neighbors have used. It's a conversation around how do we strike the right balance. There's often a conversation when it comes to incentives around a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
But at the same time, do we not want to be in the competition? So how do we strike that right balance and working with some astute and smart minds in the private sector to maybe take some learnings from how they might approach this topic, but also them understanding that we've got some certain constraints that if we're going to implement something like this. So I think it's going to become so important that we have the right types of discussion topics and we frame it the right way to avoid I like to use the word venting sessions.
Yeah, that was the word I was looking for, not the B word. Yeah.
I think also too, is that's why you have an experienced outside facilitator involved in that process. So they have that ability to say things that need to be said and keep things on track that sometimes we can't do because of our relationships with these people. So that's why it's always important to have that third party there to be able to walk those people through that process.
Okay. Yeah.
Good night.
Yeah.
All right, Wes.
Thanks, Mayor Heron. It's interesting, a couple of things. I like the idea of getting people together, business community. The topic is so critical. The last one, it's interesting to get their perspective on that. But the minute you go out there with a form and you solicit their feedback and actionable items, then the question is what's the compelling nature on council to implement the recommendation? And if council chooses not to, then there's this, I don't know whether there's this betrayal of the trust of bringing people to ask their opinion and then it's not actioned. But there's that risk that, well, they asked our questions, we gave them our heartfelt input and they didn't take it anyway. So to me, the issue is the topic is really critical. And then the presentation of the outcome to the people that participate. There's just risk in that. So the other thing is you've got 2 a year. I would suggest that you do a topic based. If you need 3 a year, you need 3. If you only got 1, but my point here is don't make it that you have to have 2 a year and then all of a sudden you don't have a topic worthy. Because then the people that are willing to volunteer to come say, well, you know what, I really should have been doing the budget back at my business, because it wasn't worth my time. So those are just my 2 caveats going forward. Having said that, every time we ask for input is a good thing. So
Maybe if I could just comment, I think you're 100% right. The work left of execution, right, to frame the discussion and then to manage people's expectations going into it. I would struggle to find an end state of one of these where everybody's sort of bumped each other's tires up and, we're all in agreement. I think it'll be sort of a common understanding. And to your point, if there's a deliberate decision made not to do something that might have been a recommendation of the majority, I think the communication of why, beyond simply, look at the council YouTube site, but at a direct communication to this panel or the group of why, will help mitigate some of that.
fair enough. Thanks, Mayor.
I'll get you right away, Shelley, but along that line of how many times a year, my thought, when I was reading this, I was comparing it to recovery task force that we had. Because it was successful for a couple of reasons. One of them, we invited people that weren't the regulars that always applied. So what you've got is fantastic for not just application based, but for invitation. But I found that recovery task force super successful. They were set names and we could go to them whenever we had a question. And we went to them on masks. We went to them on solar farm and the developer. What do we call those things?
Outside of levies?
Yeah, but we call that
Charades.
how they pay their developers. Anyway, they were there available for. So do you see like touch points besides spring and the fall with a group that you could quickly get like 10 in a room, ask a specific question that arises?
I guess I kind of see that one a bit differently in that if we needed to, I think we sort of organically already do that within our department. If we have a topic that we need to kind of get some quick feedback, mention, the Chamber of Commerce is one that we'll often go to, and the UDIs and so on that we'll often reach out to, or just personal contacts that we have in certain industries to go, hey, we're trying to do something here. What do you think of this? I think we sort of already do that. That's an option available. Yeah, and I think, that was what I was going to say is I guess I'm a little bit would be the concern is I guess part of the intention behind this is to have council have the opportunity to be part of these conversations and to sort of hear rather than the message being relayed. Okay, this board met. Here's what they said, and board hear it and see it with your own eyes and ears, kind of thing. So. I guess could we do one as one ad hoc? Maybe it might be a little bit different. Yeah, like I don't know if it would follow this format, but could we do something like that as needed?
Yeah, but I would say that this might be an investment towards that end in the sense that so each of these could conceivably have a different group of participants, right? Depending on the nature of the topic and even when we go to an organization, they may send different representatives. But I think that the open lines of communication and dare I say the trust that might be engendered by this may allow us, I think, to carry on with the great work that's being done on a weekly basis. To have that council's got a burning question, it's super short order, right? We've got now additional stakeholders or people who are invested to be able to ask those questions to Mike. I don't know if that's fair. I think you got that in a large part, but you're right. Council doesn't have that. So
I was just going to add, maybe just remember the suite of tools, right? That diagram I had, we can conduct polls if we want to sort of get the pulse of something really quickly. We could sort of do that one-on-one or a small group of, individual business owners or business leaders and sort of get the feedback on something. And this is just sort of another tool in our toolbox is to say, hey, we want to have a more qualitative conversation. We want to really dive into something that we're mulling over because this is a big challenge and it affects us. It affects, this area of the city or it affects this industry. And we want to really understand this from a bunch of different lenses.
One of the nice things about the COVID recovery task force is they were focused on COVID, obviously, but they were also residents and half the time it wasn't business or ECDEV related that we would go to them for. So I see this as a really good opportunity to put new faces in front of administration and council. Right? So not the typical that we always see. So I'm excited about it. And I have a couple of questions or comments at the end, but I'll go to Shelley because she's been waiting a while. Sorry, Shelley.
Thank you. Good morning, Mike. Just the one question with regard to the facilitator again. I mean, with 86% of your budget spent on the facilitator, it can make or break the event. And I have gotten feedback from citizens that, there's boundaries on questions and topics are kind of framed to a specific where they really can't answer or give input as to what they really want to give input on. So my question is, do you have, and actually there was one facilitator that a lot of people felt it was like a kindergarten class. There was quite a bit of negative comment on that one. So do you get feedback on the facilitators that you've used previously? Do you have a broad range of facilitators you can use, or how do you select?
Thanks for the question, Councillor. I think we would go to a procurement sort of process with this. I think in terms of putting together this budget, we just looked at some sort of publicly available sort of standard, call it pricing on some of this stuff. But obviously we would try to get some of the best pricing on this. And yes, if we receive feedback, I don't know where I should look at this stuff. If we receive feedback that the facilitator, or if we observe that the facilitator is not, doing the job that we expect, I don't know that we're going to lock ourselves into a long-term contract with them. I think we want to sort of test the waters with this and see how it goes and try to improve this as we go. I don't think I'd love to hit a home run with the first one and everything goes smashingly and it's everything and more than we expected. But I do expect that the first couple might sort of figuring this out a little bit.
Okay, so you would probably be bringing in someone new then, is what you're saying?
I mean, I don't know at this point. I mean, certainly we'd have to have those discussions and start looking at, putting together what the scope of the work that we would require from these facilitators would be and have them provide some pricing.
Okay, just as long as, I don't know if you got that information, as feedback after an event, or if we just get the calls from the public or the comments. So I really just want to, see that you're aware of what we've heard. So.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any specifics, Shelley, because I'm not.
It's around the news, maybe.
Oh, okay, all right.
No, also the budget.
And the budget money, yeah.
So generally, Councillor, if I could just add to that, I think, we do have to go to a competition, obviously, for these things, right, in terms of a request for proposal. But we do keep notes on those who we've had positive experiences and those we don't. And I would ask if you do hear anything, I think mostly we hear the same thing, but if you want to send it to us, we will absolutely update our records to make sure that, we're not offering contracts to people who've had unfavorable interactions with them.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
I also thought about locations. Silly. Rugby and soccer club have good facilities and they might be cheap and they might expose them for further events. And you said you probably would start at 6. You might want to try to vary the times to get more participation. Some might have daytimes, depending on the topic. That's all. Okay. And I wanted to know if there was one this spring, but then I kept reading. Oh, and media. So is this open to the public? Like, will media be present at these things?
Oh, good question. To be honest,
We talked about, so I don't think we would invite media, but I don't think either of these are. You know,
But if you went into the-
we're not checking IDs at the door, and if we got 50 people in there, it's gonna get to the media if they're asking. Like, I don't think we
Yeah.
necessarily, depending on the nature of the subject, control access. As a general rule, except we've got 50 people get 50 people, but we hadn't talked about necessarily specifically inviting them. You know, but could they be available if they've expressed an interest to sit in? Probably.
Sometimes it's good for them to
Yeah.
write a story after the fact.
Yeah.
All of St. Albert County is what we were talking about.
Yeah.
All right, did you have more? You had a couple more?
I just had a couple, for the qualifications, and you're saying, okay, if they work for a private business, personnel resident, I think there's value in having, if you are a resident resident and a business owner anywhere. Because if you want to know what other businesses are doing or the effects of what's happening in other parts of the region, you actually, people who are business owners in another part of the region, but happen to live in St. Albert, they can give that direct feedback. So I was a little concerned about just limiting it too much, especially if we're doing it topic based, that you actually have quite a large database. So it might almost be open to say, if anyone has any knowledge about this and wants to participate, put your name on here, and then we'll let you know if there's actually a topic that's relevant. Because you were concerned about the chamber saying how you may not fill it up. So it may not even be that they have to, because you could just have, there's a lot of people who can private business, like a lot, right? But that also may not be topic specific, right? So anyway, I just thought at the very, you may just want to just open it right up and then see how you want to narrow it down, as opposed to saying, we're going to narrow it down and hope we have enough to fill it up. But the bare minimum, I would at least include all business owners in the region who happen to be smart residents, if you still want to qualify it. Because like I said, there's just a ton of opportunity there. And also, let's say that they're a small business owner in Edmonton and you want them to come to St. Albert, those are the key ways of saying, why aren't you here? And then they have that discussion. And then, when there's an opportunity, they actually make choose to move there if what's stopping them is not being, is addressed. Right? So that was just, and I don't know if, because I know you have the framework here for approvals. Yeah.
I don't know if I may not have worded that properly, but that is the intention. So if you're
Okay.
resident in anywhere else,
Yeah.
we just want to have a little bit of. But yeah, I recognize that you might have a resident here who works in the region, has tremendous amount of expertise in a certain area.
Yeah, I would just not, if you're gonna, when you put out the call, say business owners as well, just so that they don't think they have to be an employee.
Right.
Because the owners are the ones who actually have to burden all the risk. The other thing was about the facilitators is, I don't know if we're doing this and this doesn't seem like it for our other things that we're getting feedback, not this particular, but if we were to send out a feedback request to all participants about how they like the forum and how it could be improved, especially because you're trying to get your feet under you. And how do they like the facilitator and what do they like to see and not see? Because that way you could see if the facilitator is actually helping or not without just trying to guess. And then two, what we could do to improve the forum, that would, I think that just for as far as people feeling satisfied about going, if they actually have that opportunity to say, okay, I realize this is a work in progress, but we're actually going to do a complete feedback on this. Let them know up front they're going to be getting that, so they actually think about it as they're going through it. And then you're getting that feedback, because it's not just about getting the forum to be great off the top, because you already know it's going to be a work in progress. It's also about making sure that it continues to evolve so you continue to have participation, because your biggest problem is going to be that we assume something. You have a few forums, people don't feel that they're getting heard, and they also feel like it's not improving, and then they drop off. And then in a year from now, you actually have very little participation. So I think that if we just really engage them in the process and not just assume and just go through it and say, great, you're done, I think that might help you through that.
Great comment.
So those are the two things. That's it. Thanks.
Okay. Do you have another question? No, just making sure it's good. All right, so we have determined this has to go to council. So Wes, you're going to make the motion.
I move that the Standing Committee of the Whole recommend to council that council approve the St. Albert Business Leaders Forum framework as presented.
Any comments?
I think it's a great idea to engage our business community and the business of the city. And if we can get positive feedback on a particular topic that brings value, it is a good idea.
Oh, another question?
Yeah, just related to the motion. So we've given you a bunch of feedback and we're agreeing to it as presented. So are we still going to take that in or do we say just as per council? As you wish, I guess is the wording of the motion, which is better because whether or not this forum actually had an impact or not as well. So that's what I'm asking is the wording as presented still allow that everything that we said here is still going to be just considered and then brought forward, decided upon how you wish?
I guarantee you. It won't be considered.
Okay, so just saying that does not lock us into, because, for example, Wes said, do it on topic, not twice a year. So like, if you guys say that works, we're kind of giving you liberty to do that. So even saying that, we're still okay?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all. Just one double check.
Yeah, because the only thing I really want to do is help you with recruitment, because I think we can help a lot with that. So if that is heard, then I will call for the vote. Yes and yes from the two online, so that's carried unanimously. Great, thanks, Mike. I'm excited. This is a good idea. I always love the chamber roundtables. This is sort of similar, but it'll be driven by this. Awesome. Okay. We can move on now to census. David, are you doing the census presentation?
I am.
Won the lottery, Dave.
Yeah,
Exciting
census.
topic.
This is actually a very exciting topic. And it's interesting that it happens just by chance. It happens to be on the same agenda as the previous item, the business forum. Both are ways of reaching out to the community, but they're very different, have very different purposes, and both are important for good public policy. I emphasize that to you, Councillor. Both give you information you really need to make good decisions, right? So the census, just a quick background, as you're probably many of you are aware, remember, city used to do its own census once every 2 years, right? In the even numbered years. And sometimes because the federal census was once every 5 years, and by the way, sorry, I'll interrupt myself. There's a slight mistake in the report. The federal census was not scheduled for 2020. The federal census by the Statistics Act of Canada happens every 5 years in the years ending in 6 and 1. So the federal census in 2021 was in the year it was supposed to be. What was different was because of COVID, they almost postponed it. They came that close to postponing it. They decided to go ahead, the federal government did, but they used a whole lot more online questioning than as opposed to going out and actually interacting with people. And the jury's still out on that. The jury is still out on how effective that was. So I just point that out. So that would not change our recommendation to do one this year, because that's still roughly the midpoint. You still try to stagger it. What I was starting to say before I interrupted myself is that sometimes under the old model, a federal census and municipal census would happen in the same year, because 2 years and 5 years don't exactly correlate. 2016 was one such year, right? And a person could look at that and say, well, why did we spend money on the municipal census that year when there was a federal? Now, they do have different purposes and they do ask different questions. And the thing about a municipal census, which is the basic reason why we're recommending here today to go back to having one at least once every 5 years, is because the municipal census is designed, the questions are designed for St. Albert specific programs and services, and it gets down to the neighborhood level. Because when you do your own census, because you have the data, you have the raw data, you control the raw data, you know how to put it together and make it into a report. You can report at the neighborhood level the way a federal census never could. So it's more useful, right? It's more useful for designing programs. Anyway, the bottom line is it used to be that way because of what was happening back around 2019, 20. That was the beginning of the years that we're still in, frankly, when finances are tight or having to try to squeeze every dollar. Council of the day accepted admin's recommendation to not do a census that year. But the motion said, come back and tell us, give us a new idea of how you're going to do census, how frequently, what it's going to cost. So after a bit of a delay, because we were all preoccupied with COVID for the better part of a couple of years, now here we're back. And we are recommending that we do a municipal census, not once every not every other year as we used to, but once every 5 years. Time it to be kind of in the gaps between the federal censuses. And by the way, I had to check, it is censuses, not censi. So, well, I had to check, but anyway, so if I'm using the correct plural, so you know. And we feel that would make a lot of sense because then you'll still get the high level information from the federal census. The municipal census will be more targeted to the St. Albert situation, give you information that it's hard demographic information still. I want to emphasize that. A census is not asking anyone out there for their opinions on anything. We have other ways of asking for opinions. You know, the Business Leaders Forum obviously will be one of them, but we have other methods that our communication department uses. So this is not asking anyone for their opinion or for their desires, or what they want. It's just hard demographic information. Who are you? Where do you live? Do you use transit? That sort of thing, right? You know, we would only ask questions in the census that are directly related to designing programs. So that's really what we're proposing. It's not, you know, an earth-shattering proposition. We're just saying we already have a council policy on census. The wording in there now speaks to every other year. We don't really think that's necessarily appropriate to do it, you know, slavishly every other year. We think if we make the default being every 5 years and the gaps between federal census, there's still enough flexibility in the policy. If we need census at some different interval, that can be done, right? But we think as a standard thing, honestly, you know, if you're only going to transfer $40,000 from the tax base every year instead of 90, you're saving 50 grand that stays in the people's pockets and you're still getting useful information. So that's the reason why we're making this recommendation. I really don't have anything else to say other than I guess that, you know, we're in a long tradition doing census, right? It goes back thousands of years, right? The Gospel of Luke tells us that Mary and Joseph were where they were in Bethlehem because of a census. Right, exactly. They were commanded to go there. So this has been done for literally thousands of years. It's a time-tested way of finding important, hard demographic information about your population. And we think you should return to it, but less frequently and at less cost. So, any questions?
I have just a quick one. You're the chair. But we're going to have a census.
I'm gonna put red X's on.
David, I'll start with, I have no problem. Every 5 years, $32,000. What I have a problem with is the process.
Sorry?
The process that this is in front of us, and I know Bill's gonna know exactly what I was talking about. If we talked about this at the 5-year growth plan task force, and I talking census, and I said, well, we don't do it anymore. We have a motion that says don't do censuses anymore and don't fund it. And what I'm reading in this report is that we put $32,000 in the budget this year, even though we have a previous motion that says don't fund it.
Absolutely. Which is
How did that happen?
it's a timing thing. The budget happens when it happens at that time of the year. If we didn't put it in the budget, then where are we going to get the funds, right, to do it? If we knew we were going to recommend this. If council doesn't agree with doing it every year starting this year, the fact that it's in the budget doesn't require us to spend the money. You never have to spend money that's budgeted. But if it's approved in the budget, then at least, you know, you've got that piece in place. If council now follows through, and this is why we're bringing it forward as early as possible, right, in the following year after the budget. This is basically the first opportunity after the budget was passed. Well, I guess we could have done it earlier in January, but you know, that's really the reason for that, because the timing, we did need to secure funds in case council was agreeable to this. But I guess the key thing is, what I'm trying to say is that the fact that it's in a budget doesn't mean you're bound to do it. There are two pieces. We needed budget funds. We also need this. We need council to approve this change to the policy. And clearly only council can approve the change to the policy. So the two would come together to make a census happen this year.
Okay, and I don't think you're kind of understanding where I'm coming from is we have a council motion that says don't do it. And it happened.
Yeah.
I think it should have, and this is.
It should have been communicated better so that it
It
wasn't.
should have been a business case.
Yes,
it probably should,
New,
yeah.
right?
Yes, it should.
So because I stood in front of my colleagues at this meeting saying, this is, and Bill followed up with, oops, we do. It felt like it was buried in the budget. It's one of those things that it was, I actually Googled the word census in the entire budget document. It's not there. So that's all I have to say. I 100% agree with what the data we're going to gather will be different. I think in 2020, we were focused on the fact the province had changed where they were getting their per capita numbers from.
Correct.
And census was just about population in our heads, but it's about much more. And we heard that during the presentation from Ryan about increase of hiring, et cetera. So I have no problems with what's here.
Yeah.
Just didn't like this. And Bill not giving you it either, because both of us were kind of on that.
If I may, Madam Mayor, you mentioned the piece about the province that's also alluded to in the report, so it's worth saying. A lot of municipalities were not happy with them abandoning the actual count, going to this mysterious black box to figure out what your population is. A lot of municipalities, quite frankly, didn't trust their numbers. And so the provincial government has told us that sometime, we don't know when, but it'll be very early this year, they're going to bring back a regulation and go back to using census as the basis for calculating grants.
Oh, that's good.
That's what we've heard. That's what we've been told.
Yeah, because I do know that Fort Saskatchewan for sure, maybe Strathcona were very disappointed. What they did not believe the federal numbers.
Yeah.
So they're doing their own just to kind of
Yeah.
to verify the federal numbers because they want that per capita. So
Well, that's again, what I was mentioning before, particularly this last federal census, they went to a lot of online interviewing question, right? It's not that there were no federal census takers door to door, but there were a lot fewer. And they relied a lot more on online questionnaires. And as I say, the final report on that hasn't been made public yet, but there were some issues with that. So, we would intend to do our census. I'm not saying we would make no use of online, but we would do the traditional way by and large, someone would come to your door and ask you the questions. It's just more reliable. It just is.
When did the federal census come up with our population?
I think
69.
it was about 80,
No,
sorry, 68. I was going to say, 68,000.
I thought, oh, okay. I don't know if we agreed with that. Like,
No, we didn't.
thought it was low, thought it was high. I can't remember.
I thought it was close.
Close, yeah.
Like we're still using 69,000
Yeah.
as a general number right now to describe our population.
Ken, you had a question?
Well, I actually was in relation to that last little piece and the kind of the fact that the province dropped it. Now they're looking at it. And my question was going to be around if you had any more information around the regulations, but you
We've
answered.
been told to expect it sometime in Q1.
Okay, because that's, yeah.
Imminent.
I think that's important because the federal census came out with some federal numbers came out, and we talked about the fact that even regionally, Calgary and the surrounding communities have grown up to about 1.6 million as a census metropolitan area. When, you talk about the importance, Mayor, because you've got a meeting with the Edmonton Metro Board growth and the projections hurt us potentially because I think they're understated and they don't take into account some of our opportunities for growth. So, I love the word in here in relation to it, not censuses. I like the word in here around foundational. I think foundational is critical in the sense of understanding the importance of getting accurate census data because it feeds our service levels. It feeds all of our grants, not only that we get from other different levels of government, but also the grants that we send out to our own residents. So just depending on federal census data and as you know, the federal government puts out all sorts of different census in relation to not only population, but they deal with crime types, they deal with social census as well. So, I guess I get your point around the business case, but at the same time, I thought when 2020 happened, we did it for one particular reason. But now I think like any decision, and here it comes, there's unintended consequences. And this was one of those unintended consequences. So I'm happy that we're doing this, actually.
I've got Shelley and Natalie both have their hands up.
Thank you. I have a couple questions for David. You were saying that the federal information has not been released, fully to the public yet, like the barriers that they had in their method of collecting and whatever. So why would we be going and doing a census before we have that data?
I think the easiest way to answer that question is that we recognize that you do a municipal census for different purposes, and the questions are designed to elicit different kinds of information, right? The federal census, we can't ignore it. It's there, it's mandated, it's a constitutional responsibility of the federal government under the Constitution Act. They do it and they have to do it, and we have to take it into account. But we don't have to be a slave to it. We can do our own census. We have that ability. We've done it in the past. That's the reason we are recommended doing it, because we think we'll get different and more precise information designed to allow council to focus right in on our service levels right here, not on a Canada or even a regional wide basis, but right here in St. Albert. That's why we're recommending that we start doing this again.
Right, but my concern is with the methods. You're saying that they use some different methods and you're guessing that the door-to-door is better. But
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I apologize. No, we're not looking to replicate the federal methods of doing largely online survey or online census questioning. We would do the traditional census by and large. Again, even last time we did a census, we did some questioning online, but most of it was like this traditional door to door. You probably all remember people coming to your door, and that's more reliable. So don't get too distracted about what I said about the federal census. It's just that the point I wanted to make is that they did something unusual because they were worried about transmissibility of COVID, right? We won't have that problem. We're kind of knock on wood beyond that now. And so we would go back to the more traditional door-to-door method.
Okay, and can it be confirmed that it was 90,000 the last time you did it? Am I reading?
Traditionally, yes. When we used to do a census every 2 years, going back, I think as far back as 2014, at least, maybe even further back, council would allocate 90,000 every year from the tax base, so that we would every other year have built up a fund of 180,000 to do census. That was always a little bit more than we needed, which is why it built up a little over time. But that's the nature of the beast. You estimate as best you can. So yeah, it used to be 90,000. Our finance people, in conjunction with my department, have determined that we think on a go-forward basis, 40,000 a year would probably be more than enough to do a very good census. Again, this is going to be, it'll depend on how things happen. But at this point, based on the best crystal ball we have now, we think 40,000 a year is probably what it's going to be like for at least the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, and do you have any information if it's not done by door-to-door method? Like, would it be substantially less cost to do a census in another method?
I don't want to pretend that I know more about that. I do know this, though, that in an analogous thing that we do, which is elections, I have looked into that a lot. We still do our elections. People come down to the polls in person. There are many places in the world that have mail-in ballots or even, secure methods of voting by internet. And yes, quite frankly, it is less expensive, but it's a little less reliable and a little less secure. So it's a trade-off.
I think we've evolved, like even door knocking. A lot of houses don't even have doorbells anymore. And I mean, it's a different world now, of people answering doors and that type of contact.
Generally, yeah, that's true. Generally, census takers will come back up to 3 times to the same place to see if they can get, if someone isn't home or doesn't answer the second time, they'll come back even a third. And then they'll always leave, in front of like something that, in the mailbox or whatever to say, look, we would like you to answer the census, please contact us. We get historically the response rate in St. Albert, considering that municipal census doesn't have the hammer of the federal census, where if you don't answer federally, you pay a $500 fine. We don't have that. We don't have that ability. But we get a tremendous response rate. In St. Albert, it's historically been 98, 99% or even more. Most municipalities are over 90. St. Albert is really good. Historically, people really do respond well.
Okay, and just one last comment. A lot of houses don't even have mailboxes anymore either, so.
Door hangers.
Door hangers.
Yeah, whatever it takes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Most people still have doors.
Natalie, you're up next.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. So David, anecdotally, based on my last week, COVID is definitely still in play. I'm supportive of this plan, this recommendation. I think this kind of information is so valuable as we get into planning for everything. So I really appreciate the pitch, and I look forward to seeing the results of this year's census. So that's really all that I have to say.
I'm gonna tease you. Because you always look to me in council like, is this questions or debate?
Well, but we're in committee, Kathy. So I wouldn't do that in council. And my throat hurts, so I want to get it over with.
I won't go to you for debate then. All right, Sheena.
Okay.
Shelley, Sheena.
One thing you mentioned the budget. We didn't do a budget feedback session, which we typically do. So that do. Okay. I didn't say poop, Kathy, so we don't need to this part of the words.
7
So,
George Carlin.
Anyway, so that hasn't been done. So just as a general feedback, that may be something, I realize it's quite late going into it, but because I have all sorts of feedback. The other thing was, this is like notice, I think that we should be updating. I'm going to do most motion this, that we update our per capita based projects annually based on the past 5 years of data. Using the censuses of the federal and the provincial and this, because I guess I will go to debate at the time, but I think that we're updating it not frequently enough. And so this, if we just take the average and adjust it, it would make sense. So I'm giving you notice of motion.
Capital-based projects.
Capital that the city funded per capita based programs. This is my notice of motion. I'll just read it to you right now. And you can change it, David. This is just like rough, okay? So you can talk and go refine it. That all city funded per capita based programs are updated annually with the average population increase over the previous 5 years be used as a metric using the federal municipal census. So
can you send that to Ledge in the form of an email?
yes, I wrote it out, so it can go out. But I'm just giving you notice. I think that based on the census, so I'm actually really glad you brought it forward, because when I did that, it occurred to me that that's one of the deficiencies that we actually have in our current program funding. So those are the two things. So, and when I said you won the lottery, I didn't mean it like you actually didn't. It's just not a super exciting topic, but it's a necessary topic.
That's very important.
Yeah. So that's it.
I can tell you our staff is very excited about doing the census. They know how important it is, and it's a part of being a public servant.
Any more questions? Good, basket. Anyone want to make the motion?
I can do it.
Councilor Mackay.
That the Standing Committee of the Whole recommend to council that the first sentence of section 1 of council policy C-CAO-21 conducting a census under service standards and expectations be deleted and the following substituted in its place. Unless otherwise prescribed by provincial regulation or resolution of council commencing in the year 2023, the city shall conduct municipal censuses at intervals of once every 5 years, time to occur at approximately the midpoint of the intervals between the scheduled federal censuses. Should it, and just a question, Mr. LaFleur, I mean, there was some conversation around potentially provincial regulations. Should we just deal with that when and if it arrives?
That's why we threw the provincial reference into the policy. So in case there is a regulation, we can roll with that punch.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that there was clarification of that.
Okay, before I accept that, Mr. LaFleur, would you like a motion to rescind PM 20053, which says we don't fund it ongoing?
No, I don't think we need that, because that, if you look carefully at it, it says that the 2020 municipal census be canceled. the ongoing transfer and that administration make recommendations for a future census program, which is what we're doing now. So we're we're responding to what we're required to do in that motion. So
Okay. And so it's the understanding is that will be funded approximately 32,000 a year in the budget.
40.
40, okay. Sorry, yeah, that's. All right, accept that, Ken, anything to?
I think that most of the comments have been come around in questions, in the form of questions or comments. But I mean, obviously, like again, the word is foundational, and it's very important in the way that not only are we getting funds for essential services and even roads and social services, but it's also important how we determine and how do we distribute some of our funds to some of our nonprofit agencies and some of our other agencies as well, because it's entirely as we just went through, the formula is tied to per capita funding. So I look forward to this, and go ahead.
Okay. You know,
I look forward to hearing
what I gotta
Councilor
say,
Hugh's comments.
is that I don't think that we should be leaving the census up to some other level of government for solely termination each decade. So even if they canceled it, we'd be guaranteed we do it at least every 5 years. And also, we are not simply relying on their methods to determine what our population is. So actually taking some control over that, especially because there's so much involved with the funding, I think is absolutely necessary to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
That's it. Mike?
Importance of facts and data decision-making. Perfect. Thank you.
I predict a rush from all the departments. We want this question, we want this question.
we've already heard back from about 4 directors with suggestions for the kinds of questions. They're great questions that are really specific to the programs that we deliver. So that's why we're excited. It's good stuff.
All right, I see no more comments, so I'll call for the vote. That carries unanimously. We're adjourned.
I can do the next motion too.
I got to be adjourned. You guys.
Excellent.
I think we'll be happy to-